The boardroom sat at the very top of Hargreave International's headquarters, a cathedral of glass and steel suspended above the city. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around the room, revealing a skyline that looked small and obedient from this height. A long table of dark polished wood dominated the space, its surface so reflective that the people seated around it appeared doubled, as if wealth itself demanded echoes. Victor Hargreave sat at the head, as he always did. His tailored suit fit him like armor, and the silver at his temples only sharpened his authority. He listened with half an ear as two senior lawyers debated acquisition percentages and offshore tax structures, their voices smooth, precise, and utterly forgettable. To Victor, numbers like these were background noise, as familiar as breathing. He was about to interrupt when the doors opened. At first, no one noticed. The lawyers kept talking, a board member scrolled on her tablet, another checked his watch. Then the sound of small footsteps crossed the carpet, too light, too hesitant to belong in this room. Victor's assistant glanced up, confused. A boy stood just inside the doorway. He looked painfully out of place, like a sketch accidentally left on a finished painting. He couldn't have been more than 12, maybe 13 at most. His jacket was clean but clearly worn thin at the elbows, his shoes scuffed and slightly too big, as if bought with the hope he'd grow into them. His hair was neatly combed, parted carefully, the way a parent is when they want the world to take their child seriously. The boy didn't hover by the door. He walked forward, each step deliberate, until he stood near the center of the table, surrounded by people who controlled billions with a signature. "I came to claim my inheritance," the boy said. The words landed oddly, too formal for his age, too calm for the absurdity of the moment. For a second, silence spread across the room, thin and fragile. Then someone chuckled. Another followed. The sound grew into polite, restrained laughter, the kind that assumes a joke must be present somewhere, even if it hasn't quite been identified yet. Victor leaned back in his chair, amused despite himself. "Is this a new kind of protest?" he asked lightly, glancing at his assistant. "Because if it is, it's certainly creative." The assistant had already risen halfway from her seat, eyes fixed on the boy. "Security. My name is Elias Moore," the boy said, cutting cleanly through the noise. His voice didn't crack, it didn't tremble, that alone made a few smiles falter. "My mother was Anna Moore." Something subtle shifted. One of the lawyers stopped smiling. Another frowned, fingers pausing mid-note. Victor's amusement cooled, though he didn't yet know why. "I don't know any Anna Moore," Victor said, his tone sharpening. "And this meeting is private. You shouldn't be here." "She worked at your coastal estate," Elias replied. 12 years ago. In the kitchens. Victor waved a dismissive hand, irritation flickering across his face. "Thousands of people have worked for me. That doesn't make them family." "This is ridiculous. My mother died last winter," Elias added. The words weren't thrown like a weapon. They were stated, plain and heavy. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Victor exhaled through his nose. "Security," he said again, louder. Elias didn't move. Instead, he reached into the inside pocket of his jacket with careful slowness, as though afraid someone might stop him. He pulled out a folded envelope, creased and softened by time, and placed it gently on the table. It looked fragile among the tablets, leather portfolios, and crystal water glasses. "My mother told me to give you this," Elias said. "If you ever said you didn't know her." Victor stared at the envelope. For reasons he couldn't immediately name, he felt a flicker of unease. He nodded once to the lawyer nearest him. The lawyer picked it up, adjusted his glasses, and opened it. From inside slid a faded photograph. He turned it so the board could see. Victor's breath caught before he could stop it. The photograph showed a younger version of himself, less polished, sunburned, smiling in a way he hadn't smiled in years. His arm was around a woman standing barefoot on sand, her hair blown wild by the sea breeze. She was laughing at something outside the frame, eyes bright, unguarded. "Anna." The room seemed to lean closer. Behind the photograph lay a notarized document, yellowed slightly at the edges. The lawyer skimmed it, his brow furrowing deeper with every line. "This appears to be a private acknowledgement," the lawyer said carefully. "Signed by Mr. Hargreave." Victor stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. "That proves nothing," he snapped. "Old photographs, forged documents, people try this all the time." Elias looked up at him, not angry, not pleading. "Just steady." "She kept it in a box under her bed," he said. "With my birth certificate." The laughter was gone now. Completely. In its place was a tense, almost reverent silence. Victor felt he'd crawl up his neck. He remembered that summer. The coast. The woman who laughed easily and didn't care who he was or what he owned. He had told himself it was brief, insignificant, something swallowed long ago by time and success. Clearly, it hadn't been. Even if this were true, Victor said, forcing a tight smile, you don't simply walk into a boardroom and make claims like this. I didn't know where else to go, Elias replied. Your lawyers wouldn't return my calls. The chairwoman, who had been silent until now, folded her hands on the table. We should proceed carefully, she said. If there is even a possibility. There isn't, Victor interrupted. Then we are legally obligated to verify it, she finished calmly. Victor's jaw tightened. He looked around the table and realized, with a chill, that no one was laughing anymore. No one was on his side by default. Wealth didn't matter here. Evidence did. Very well, the chairwoman continued. We'll arrange a DNA test immediately. Elias nodded, as if he had expected nothing less. Victor sank back into his chair, the city beyond the glass suddenly feeling very far away, as though the height that once empowered him had begun to tilt. The boy remained standing at the center of the room, small but unyielding, holding the weight of a truth that refused to be escorted out. The boardroom felt different in the evening, as though the daylight had carried away its confidence. The glass walls now reflected the city's lights instead of conquering them, turning the room inward, trapping everyone inside their own thoughts. Victor Hargreaves stood alone at the window, one hand braced against the cool glass, watching headlights crawl through the streets below like restless veins. 3 days had passed since the boy walked in and upended his carefully ordered world. 3 days of tests, calls, sealed documents, and long stretches of silence that felt louder than any argument. Victor had barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the photograph again, himself on the beach, careless and alive, unaware that a single summer could echo for more than a decade. The doors opened behind him, and soft footsteps approached. He didn't turn. He already knew who it was. The board is here, his assistant said quietly. And, the boy. Victor nodded once. His reflection in the glass looked older than he remembered. When he turned, the board members were filing in, their faces stripped of their usual ease. No one joked. No one checked a phone. The chairwoman carried a thin folder in both hands as if it weighed far more than paper ever should. They took their seats, leaving Victor standing. That alone told him everything. Please, the chairwoman said, gesturing. Sit. Victor obeyed. The folder was placed in front of him. The moment it touched the table, the room seemed to hold its breath. Independent labs, the chairwoman said. Chain of custody verified. Results are conclusive. Victor's fingers hovered over the folder before he opened it. He already knew what it would say. Still, seeing it, black ink, clinical language, percentages that left no room for interpretation, felt like stepping into cold water. Paternity confirmed. 99.9%. The number burned itself into his mind. So close to certainty it might as well have been fate. For a long moment, no one spoke. Victor felt a strange hollowness open in his chest, as if something long buried had finally broken through and taken its space back. Under corporate and family law, the chairwoman continued, voice steady, Elias Moore is recognized as a biological heir. The words echoed. Heir. Victor had planned for everything except this. Invite him in, she said gently. Elias entered without hesitation. He wore the same jacket, the same careful expression, but something had changed. The uncertainty was gone. He knew now. They all did. He stood across from Victor, hands at his sides, eyes searching the room with quiet curiosity. He wasn't afraid. That unsettled Victor more than anger would have. Victor cleared his throat. You didn't come for money, he said, repeating what Elias had said before, as if hoping the repetition might change its meaning. No, Elias replied. My mother made me promise to say that first. Victor nodded slowly. Then why now? Elias met his gaze. Because when my mother died, she left me a small trust. Nothing big, just enough for school. Your lawyers froze it. A murmur moved through the board. They said it could be contested, Elias went on. That only family could claim it or release it. So I told them the truth. I didn't think they'd make me come here. Victor felt something tighten painfully in his chest. The machinery of his empire, efficient, merciless, had reached out and touched a child without even knowing it. I didn't know, Victor said, and heard how weak it sounded. Elias tilted his head slightly. She said you might say that. The chairwoman spoke again. There is also a private addendum to Mr. Hargreaves' estate plan, drafted 12 years ago. It states that any biological child, acknowledged or not, is entitled to legal representation and a defined inheritance. Victor closed his eyes. He remembered signing that document late one night, guilt-heavy and unresolved, a promise to a future he assumed would never arrive. So that's it, he said quietly. It's all written down. Yes, the chairwoman replied. But what happens next is not. The board rose almost in unison, formal decisions already recorded. They would handle the legalities, the transfers, the structures. That was their role. This, what remained between Victor and the boy, was not something they could vote on. One by one, they left the room, until only Victor and Elias remained. The silence between them was different now. Not hostile, just raw. Victor stood, slowly, and stepped around the table. Up close, the resemblance was impossible to ignore, the shape of the eyes, the line of the mouth when set in thought. A mirror he had never known existed. I failed your mother, Victor said at last. The words came out low, rough. I knew she was pregnant. I told myself I'd handle it later. And then later never came. Elias listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't accuse. She didn't hate. You, Elias said. She was angry sometimes. But mostly she just wanted me to be safe. Victor swallowed. Did she struggle? Yes, Elias answered honestly. But she worked hard. She was proud. She said my father was a man who built big things. She just didn't know if he could build small ones. The sentence hit harder than any accusation. Victor extended his hand, uncertain, the gesture awkward and unfamiliar. He had closed deals worth billions with more confidence than this single moment. I don't know how to be what you deserve, he admitted. But I want to try. Elias looked at the offered hand for a long second. Then he took it. His grip was firm, real. Outside the windows, the city continued its endless motion, unaware that a carefully controlled empire had just shifted at its foundation. Victor felt it then. Not fear, not loss, but something dangerously close to hope.